Hello chaps and chapesses, and in this week's video we're going to look at my top 10 saltwater casting tips. We've just got back from the European Sportfishing show at Bristol, and I gave a casting demonstration during that show, and I presented some very useful tips and tricks for casting in the salt. If you have a wind in front of you, if you have a wind behind you, the water haul, doubling up your line speed, and all sorts of little things which I think are quite useful to the flats fishermen. So without further ado, I hope you find this interesting. Today what I want to do is I want to talk about some single-handed rod techniques, predominantly saltwater techniques, which can then be used and adapted for most normal fishing situations. Now, the principal difference between fishing on a river or fishing here in the UK and then fishing on a salt flat is, firstly, there's no trees, which is really, really good. No trees is a big bonus. Secondly, there's wind, which is maybe not quite as good, but there are many, many ways of counteracting wind. The other difference is quite often fish species come and go very rapidly, so you have to be able to take the opportunities as they arise. To do that, we quite often need to be able to put out a shot quite quickly. It's not, the fish is going to cruise past because you're dealing with tides, you're dealing with riffles and channels and speed of water pushing. So your opportunities tend to come quite quickly, and if you don't maximize your opportunities, then you're going to miss your shot. The fish is not going to sit and wait for you. So that's why sometimes saltwater fishing can become a little frenetic when you're on the flats. So really, where am I going with all of this? Well, I'm going with speed of presentation, and there are some very different casting techniques that we use when we're fishing on a salt flat than if you were fishing at home. And the first one is, rather than moving in your traditional trajectory of up and down, so that normal kind of tick-tock 9 till 12 and hitting the roof, which I can hear it slapping up behind me, so I don't pull a tile panel out, we actually begin to drop our shoulder. Lefty Cray was a big advocate of the shelf cast, if you like, so your elbow is going to go from this plane to this plane. You're going to start side casting, and it's as if you are moving your elbow on a shelf. And what that does is it allows you to firstly drop your line, and it also allows you to build a very, very quick line speed. So what we're going to do is actually begin to open up our shoulder. So as the cast comes back, the shoulder opens. So you can see my shoulder opens right out rather than being confined to this position. I'm going to start pulling out my shoulder and laying out the line behind me, which means I can actually bring the rod angle much more parallel to the ground. The benefit of that is I can start generating more line speed, a bit like a hammer throw. I can very quickly bring my shoulder forward, and with a flick of that wrist, I can really start to move the tip and get some more line speed going. So just showing that again, shoulder comes out, and then literally I'm going to punch it, and it just flies out of the rod rings. And what I'm going to do at the same time is start to double haul. Now I know everybody has come across double hauling. It's not a particularly, there are people who are far more elegant at teaching it than I, so I shall leave them to do that. But once you incorporate a double haul into it as well, then you start really pulling more line speed out. And the last thing, which really helps when you want to get a long distance line out rapidly and quickly, is to actually release line on your back cast. I know that sounds a bit odd, and we're going to get into that situation of trying to pat your head and rub your tummy at the same time. So what you do is, as you cast, you let the line run through your hands. And what that does is not only does it lengthen your back cast very rapidly, which means that you're going to have a chance to put more line out. But as the line is traveling backwards and you haul forwards, what that does is double up your line speed even further. So you can generate a lot more power very quickly and put that fly to target in a much more rapid manner. So if I demonstrate that, out it goes behind me, punch, and it's gone. So if I'm casting, I let it go out behind me, and then I can just haul it and out it goes. You can see very rapid cast. So if someone says to me, I'm standing on the front of a skiff. So if I'm standing on the skiff like this and I've got my guide behind me as he's up there, got to try not to hook him, that's really bad. Big faux pas in the saltwatering industry. You'll find you won't see many fish from that point onwards if you tend to hook him at the back of the head. For the purposes of this demonstration, I think I'm going to have to kneel. Keeping a low profile, because otherwise I think it might be a bit tight on space. So you're in the ready position, which means you're going to have some line out of your rod tip so that you can make a cast quickly. You're in control of your line. And if you're on a skiff, this makes a rather good skiff actually. It's a pity it's not white. Make sure your line is carefully put in the footwell of the skiff that you're fishing in, so you can control it. It's out of the wind blowing across the top of the skiff. And your guide will say, okay, bonefish. I see a bonefish coming towards us, 12 o'clock, 20 feet, 20 yards, whatever. So you can quickly generate out and put the fly down where you need it to go, rapidly. Hopefully, it's in the vicinity of the fish. So just showing you that one again. Very rapid punch, and that gets you to your target very, very quickly. So when it comes to trying to throw a bit more length of line, I know we all tend to strive to want to cast further. It's in our nature. Generally the fish are at our feet, but we don't care. We want to cast over there, because we can. And to generate a little bit more distance, with your last cast, what I tend to do is I'm casting and then I launch the line up in the air. So that what that does is it creates less surface tension, less friction with the line guides, and allows you to aerialize the line. Now if you're in a situation where you've got the wind behind you, for example, you can use the wind. The wind is your friend. So we're going to punch it up. And the wind, you will find, will carry your line for you and give you another 10 feet. Granted, it's a little harder to control exactly where it's gone, but a bit like, say, for example, shooting. You lead your bird, and in the same instance, in saltwater, you will quite often lead your fish. So if you are confident in your ability to put the fly down, especially if you practice a lot, which you should, it means you can launch it where you want it. You anticipate where the fly is going to go. So that brings me very succinctly onto wind. So we talk about wind. Wind is our friend. You must be mad, I hear you all saying. Wind. So, you've got the wind howling into your face, and your guide turns around and goes, hey man, there's a permit. He's coming, and he's coming straight at you into the wind, which is always what permit do. They're never in the right place at the right time. So how do you counteract wind coming straight into your face? Well, there's some very simple techniques you can use. If the wind is coming into your face, you want to use a high back cast and a low forecast. So high back cast, low forecast. So if you go up and then down, I shall duck down again. So we're going to go high back cast, low forecast. And you'll often find that there is actually a dead spot. Where the wind crosses across a flat, there is a dead spot about 4 to 5 feet underneath that. And you can actually, if you're clever, you could punch a line into the dead spot. So if you go high and then punch it low, you can actually quite often get underneath that wind. And you want to throw a nice tight loop without catching a tailing loop. So to do that, you have to use a little more wrist than you would normally. So it comes up, I'm just going to tighten up my wrist a little bit more, and that's going to throw a much, much tighter loop. And that'll put that fly, hopefully, underneath. Okay, so now we have the situation reversed. Well, as we talked about earlier. this instance, we're going to use the opposite. So if the wind is coming from behind you, you want to tuck the line under the wind, ooh, caught it, and then lift it up. So I'll show that one again. Low back cast, high forecast. So we're going to punch it that way. And then again, you can punch it underneath the wind behind you, and then you'll find that you can then launch your fly line and put it up and over the top. Now at the moment I'm using a 9-weight. I'm using a Hardy Zephyrus 9-weight, which is my preferred weapon of choice, mostly because I haven't managed to break it. I'm quite mean to fishing tackle. These rods don't break, or I haven't managed to break one yet, considering that they've kind of done tuna where they shouldn't have and various other nasty fish species. Okay, so we've done a couple of wind techniques. If the wind is coming across your shoulder, use it. The other situation you will have is the wind will invariably come across the shoulder which you're casting from. Now you can either be really swanky and switch to your left, which I'm not going to do, because I'll probably look like a muppet. I'm going to show you another way to get around that, which is called a backhand cast. Now I think the backhand cast is probably one of the most useful techniques in any fly fisherman's portfolio. It has huge numbers of applications. You can use it in any part of the world, whether you're wading a salmon river in Russia or Iceland, or you're in Argentina or anywhere like that. Anywhere where you're a situation where you've got a wind crossing across your shoulder, you can turn around and do a back cast. So what do I mean by a back cast? I'm going to turn around, I'm going to cast this way. Oh, but the fish aren't over there, are they? No, no. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cast this way. And then I'm just going to let go. Oh look, a back cast. So casting this way, cast this way, and then just let go. Control the line. I always control the line with my thumb. Just let it run through there and it stops it getting tangled up. And as you get better at this and more confident, your back cast can start to get more power in it. And actually a back cast can be more powerful than any forecast. Why? Because you take the rod butt, you jam that into your forearm, and as you pull the line across your body and you're hauling in one direction, you can use your forearm to generate an enormous amount of power in the tip section. And this comes in particularly useful when you start looking at much larger line weights, which I'm going to move on to in a minute. And if you use this technique, you can actually start to look down your rod tip like a gun sight. And you'll get used to casting backhand. I quite often cast backhand a lot of the time just because I'm even more comfortable in some ways casting backhand than forehand. And you can punch, use your gun sight, and move that rod down in that direction. Now that comes in particularly useful when we move off the 9-weight. We move on to the big guns. We start talking about 12 weights and Charlie Chicken. It's going anywhere near you because it really hurts. I know, because I've checked. So this is a very different kettle of fish, if you'll forgive the pun. So 12 weight is my normal GT rig that I use in the Seychelles. I'm mildly obsessed with these fish. That's probably an understatement. So this makes a nice big plop. It's very satisfying. It even creates its own bow wave when I pull it through the water. So the 12 weight is a big stick. So same techniques, but what I'm going to tend to do is I'm going to use an elliptical cast. And that means when I'm casting backwards, it's low, and then I loop it up. That keeps that hook a long way away from me. I don't want it anywhere near me. Now, moving from a 9-weight to a 12-weight is one of those things that a lot of fishermen who move to saltwater and are going for tarpon are going for jacks, are going for GTs, they're going for predatory species. 12 weight is their main choice, but jumping up to a 12 weight is a big step. It's a very different animal. It doesn't like bending very much, for starters. It's a bit like a stick with rod fittings on it. Although actually I have to say this one is nicer than some I've used. So I'm going to keep that fly away from me with Charlie Chicken. Charlie Chicken is going to bounce out there. Now, back to our backhand cast. Sail away. Marvelous. That's all right. No, it's cool. I like it. Okay, so backhand cast. Now this is where it really comes into its own. Because you can put that rod butt into your forearm, as we talked about before, and you can start actually making a 12 weight bend. It doesn't like bending very much. You can make it bend. That means you can punch a very quick line with a 12 weight. Lift, and punch. And you can see how much power I'm generating off my forearm. It's not brute power that I'm using. It's actually the fact that I'm just bending that tip exactly when it needs to bend. And I'm loading it up, and I'm loading the rod up, and the rod is the one that's doing the work, not me. It's not my shoulder. Because you see so many people who are casting like this, and they're just making life very difficult for themselves. They've got straight arm, and they're going, oh my God, fishing with this thing is impossible, it's so hard. It's not. You just need to think about the same principles that you use when you're using a much lighter line weight. So, backhand cast. And you can lift that up, and you can just gently drop that down where you need it as well. So let's talk about fighting big fish. Let's talk about fighting fish in saltwater for starters. So, the one thing that you do not do in saltwater is trout strike. Do not do this. Because what happens is you pull the fly out of the fish's mouth. A lot of saltwater species, especially bonefish, have got an overturned mouth, a bit like a grayling. So when they're feeding along the ground. They're chasing shrimps, they're chasing crabs, they're chasing crustaceans. So when you come to, ooh, it was a big slap, cool. What we do is we do a thing called a strip strike. What you don't want is slack. Slack is your enemy, because if you have slack with a saltwater fish, it'll probably pop off. So what we do is we hook a fish, point the rod directly at it, grab the line, and we pull backwards. Obviously maybe not do that with a bonefish, because you might kind of take off its head off. But with a big GT, stripping back, and then fish hits the fly, and you know when a fish like that hits a fly because it comes up like a nuclear submarine behind the fly. Its head comes out of the water, it stares at you and it goes, are you going to have a go? And the answer is, yeah, absolutely we're going to have a go. So you strip strike it, you set it, and then you have to hang on. So if, for example, there's a GT, and there's a GT out there, there's a GT moving out, I don't know, 11 o'clock-ish or something like that. Where's my GT? So there I am, stripping away, bang, setting. And then what we're going to do is, rather than lift the rod angle up here, which is what you do with a lot of other species, I'm going to keep this really low, and I'm going to use the whole power of the blank, and I'm going to make that fish fight. Preferably not around a pillar, but carrot or something like that. So when the fish heads in that direction, fish, head in that direction, thank you. Listening to the words of command. I'm going to lean in this direction. And what that's going to do is that's going to put that fish off balance. So I'm going to constantly knock him off balance, and I'm going to pull down at the same time. Do you know what that's going to do? It's going to drop its head into the flat. It doesn't like it up himself. So we're going to hit it hard. And then we're going to start pumping it, and we're going to start winding. And then the fish is going to take off in the other direction. And then I'm going to flip the rod over, and I'm going to go in the other direction. So See if we can get around the speaker. Yes, he is. Excellent. Pump and wind. Pump, wind. Use your knees, use your legs. How much pressure is being exerted on there? Is it making your arm hurt yet? So I'm going to keep fighting this fish. Man, this is an ugly fish. I'm not sure I want to keep this one. I think I'll put it back. And I'm going to tail you now. Brilliant. Thank you very much, fish. So we got some water. So that is how we fight big species with a 12 weight. If anybody wants to come and talk about international fishing destinations, please come and see us on the stand at the end. I hope you enjoyed that rather silly diversion. And thank you very much for coming to watch me. And I hope you have a great day for the rest of the show. Thanks a lot.
Your appreciation, please, for Peter McLeod.
Thanks for watching this little film on some saltwater casting tips and tricks. I hope you found that useful. If you did, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.